Kei atu nui, kei aku rahi, kei aku whakatamarahi ki te rangi, aku whakataitei ki te whenua. Koutou ngā maunga whakahi o te nukurua o te whenua. Ngā taniwhatere wai o ngā moana, o ngā awa putanua i te motu. O tira, ngā hau, whakaora wairua o ngā tōpito e whā o tēnei motu tēnā koutou. Nau mai, tauti mai i tēnei rānei. E tika ana kia mihia o tātou mate, ara koro ngāpō, ko koe tonu kei tukurai o mahara i tēnei wā. O tira koutou, te hunga rauwhero, kua mene atu ki te pō, koutou te hunga mate ki a koutou, haere, haere e oki. Huri mai ki a tātou te kanohi ora, tēnā tātou. Tātou ngā tumanakotanga o ngā mātua tipuna, tēnei au ka mihi, tēnei au ka whakamāno atu ki a koutou. Mō koutou, kua tai a tinana mai nei, o tira kua tai marunga mai i te hangarau, i te rānei ki te whakarongo ki enei pahupahu aku. E kore e mutu aku mihi ki a koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Me mihi ka tika hau ki a koe kei, tēnā koe, kua tai a tinana mai ki te whakarongo ki enei kōrero. Me kore ake koe, ko kore au e tū ki te tuku i enei momo kōrero i te rānei. O tira, me mihi ka tika au ki a Chris, rāwatahi ko Susan. Kāri konei i te rānei, engari nā rātou te whakai mai kia haere au ki tā wāhi ki te mahi i ngā mahi ai e au. O tira, me mihi ka tika au ki oku pau, ngā pau whakawhirina ki moku i roto i tēnei ao, ngā rā o tēnei ao, ko oku papa era, ko Steve, ko Derek, kāri konei, ko Raiwa, kai te whakapaukaha ki te morimori, ki te tautoko, ki te whakapakari au i roto i aku mahi, e tāia ai e au aku wawata te whakatutuki. No reira, me mihi ai ka tika ki a koutou. O tira ki oku hua mahi o roto mai o Toi Haukura, koutou e pikau ana i aku ake mahi, no kuka haere ki tā wāhi, ki te whawhe, ki te pahupahu, ki te mahi noihoai, tēnā koutou, koutou anō hoki aku tauira, te whānau whānui o Toi Haukura, tēnei au ka mihi. So, I just want to welcome everybody who has been here today, who's come in today, and who's also tuning in on the live stream. I'm particularly nervous that it's live streams because now I'm on a camera and everybody can see me, and I thought it was just going to be us here in this room, and I was like, yes. But alas, this is how it's going to be. I suppose that the benefit of having it live streamed is that a lot of my friends and colleagues who join me on my journey on the ship with a P for World Youth, they are able to stream and listen to my kōrero today. There are a couple of things that you need to know about me as a person before I even go into anything. The first thing is that I talk really fast in all of the languages that I speak. So I'm just going to rely on Irina and Trees to be like, hey, you're talking too fast, so that I can slow down. But if you feel like you're not keeping up, or if I'm talking too fast, will you just wink at me or something? Secondly, I tend to divert into these epic tales, but I promise you that they do actually have some relevance to the point that I'm trying to make. So you have to stay with me, I promise, it's all relative. I think that I inherited this trait from my late grandmother, whose best friend was the random person in the supermarket that she'd just met. And also from one of the people who I consider one of my foremost mentors, Derek Lardeli, who was one of the most prolific storytellers of Māoridom, I think. It's one of his finer traits, but sometimes when I do it, it's kind of a little bit long-winded, but I am actually trying to get to a point, and true to my own word, I've just already diverted to some other kaupapa, so sorry. The last thing that you need to know about me is that when I get nervous, my happy place and my happy space to go to is Te Reo Māori. So that's a problem because not everyone in the nation and in this room actually speaks Te Reo Māori. So if I'm pausing, I'm either trying to translate my thoughts from Māori to English, or I might just have a really, really brilliant point that I need to make that just needs to be thought out a little bit more. Need to take a bit of a pause. So bear with me. When I go through this presentation, it's going to seem like it's a bit all over the place, but I promise you we're going to come full circle and everything should explain itself. So, ko waiahau. I'm not going to dive straight into my kaupapa yet. This is a very important part. Ko waiahau. Tēnei o e tuake nei ko Ruth Smith tōku ingoa. He uri ahau no te tairāwhiti tūturu. Katoa oku whakapapa ka kapi roto o te tairāwhiti. Nō reira, he uri ahau, he tīwaiwaka ahau nā Māui, he ke mai, he mokopuna ahau nā rua taupare, nā te ao tā warirangi, he ke mai, he uri taniwha ahau no Paikeari ki Moana, ara, whiti mai ki roto o Tūranganui a Kiwa, he kura nā mahaki, he uri o te kai kōhuru, ara, i tapai a te ingoa ki tōku hapu ko Ngāti Kōhuru. Whiti atu ki Ngāti Porou ki te tonga e ki ana, ara ki roto o Kahungunu ki Nuhaka, he uri whakaheke tēnei o te whānau a Rākai Pāka ki roto o te Nuhaka. Nō reira tēnei au ka mihi, tēnei au ka ohatu ki a koutou katoa. So, I am currently a lecturer at Toi Reo School of Māori Visual Arts here at EIT. I actually teach across all of the programs that are studied here at Toi Reo. I particularly specialise, as Stevie mentioned in his introduction, in this thing called Toi Reo. So Toi Reo is quite a unique program to Toi Reo, which is all about the language, that is the Māori language, and its relationship to art, that is Māori art. My profile has recently come to include lecturing on our postgraduate certificate in Museum and Heritage Studies on the paper Rangi, which is all about traditional concepts and how we can relate them to the museum and heritage environment. So that's my day job. I love my job. I love my students. Most times. I love my colleagues, and I love these four walls that we're in right now. They're very beautiful and inspiring, and I count myself lucky every day that I get to come here to Toi Reo. Outside of Toi Reo though, I like to consider myself a bit of a jack of all trades, and I will get stuck into everything and anything that helps me to channel my Māoritanga and promote my Māoritanga in a positive and empowering light. And so I suppose that some of the roles that I play outside of Toi Reo of note are things like te reo me ngā tikanga. So in te reo me ngā tikanga, I'm a self-professed linguist. I engage in everything to do with te reo Māori and its revival and its preservation, its retention. So this is a photo of me and some of my colleagues that was in my group from Te Panekiretanga o Te Reo Māori, which is the Institution for Excellence in the Māori Language. So I was part of that group from 2013 to 2014, and this is our graduation day. Te Panekiretanga has been one of probably the major foundations in fostering my own ideas about what it is to revitalise and retain our reo and our tikanga. But one thing I do really want to mention that I feel is really important is that before I went to at the same time I was at Te Panekiretanga, I had actually already started at Toi Reo. And I was a traditionalist in terms of language retention and revival. That is, I was all about the spoken word. I believe that the best way to retain and revitalise a language was face-to-face, maybe not mouth-to-mouth, but spoken word, engaging in conversation. And I felt that it was the tried, and I suppose you can say it's the true-ish way, or the true-ish method of language retention. But being here and learning and experiencing the visual language that we see here on these walls at the moment, that is Toi Reo, and other types of reo that we're nurturing here at Toi Reo at the moment, my scope on how language can be saved has really broadened. And I'll talk more about this topic in about 3 years' time, to you all when I finish my PhD. Okay. So that's one of my first loves, te reo me ona tikanga, te reo me ngā tikanga. One of my second greatest loves in my life is haka. I'm probably most well known in my own community as a performer and a teacher of kapa haka. I've done haka since forever. It's a trait that's been handed down by my beautiful grandmother over here, who still performs, by the way. She's nearing 80 and still performs every day. It's amazing. And my grandfather, and I'm an active member of Wahirere Māori Club. I've been in there for about since I was 13, so maybe the last 13 years. So as a performer, that's what I do. But I also have been teaching kapa haka since I was 17 years old, actually. When I was down in Wellington, I started teaching high school students at Porirua College. And then the following year, that moved out into the surrounding schools, into Aotea, Mana College and Tawa College. I was also heavily involved in the teaching core group for Ngai Tauira, which is the Māori Students Association at Victoria University, where I studied. And then just last year, my partner, Rongomai, who was a teacher at Te Kurikaupapa Māori o Ngā Uri a Māui in the wharekura, he and his colleague, Leyland Stewart, along with the head of the wharekura at Te Kurikaupapa Māori o Horau Tawananga, Maxwell Martinga, they decided that they wanted to create a haka team for the wharekura in this region. And so I, along with my colleague called Katrina here, and Maxwell's wife Sandy, the six of us created this team called Te Manawatahi, which is a collaboration between the two wharekura here in the Tūranga region. And so that's been basically my life for the last year. This is literally all we've done, and Matua Josh, who's sitting in the audience, can definitely agree. He totally knows. That we whakapau kaha for our kids. And that is one of the most rewarding things that I've been able to do in my recent time teaching. I suppose one of my last greatest loves in my life is my whānau, my hapu and my iwi. And so this is a picture of my own marae, the place where I was brought up as a child. This is on the... Is that left? Left side is Te Poho o Mahaki, my meeting house, and then on the right-hand side is Te Kura o Mahaki, our dining hall out at Waihirere, which is just about 15 minutes that way into the country. I'm a servant to my iwi, my whānau, my hapu, and my iwi. I actively get involved with hui, with teaching in my marae, especially things to do with tikanga Māori and te reo Māori. I love to take part in the community wānanga forums. From time to time, I just try to get involved in all of the hui that happen here on the Tairāwhiti, things like emceeing manu kōrero or tamararo competitions, or even just going as a spectator. I usually love to get really involved with the community. Lately though, because I play such an active role in hui Māori at my own marae, that's kind of manifested itself as me becoming a secretary and a trustee for my marae, which I wasn't really prepared for, but oh well. But that relationship is really important to me, the relationship between my whānau, my hapu, my iwi and myself. It's something that I take really, really seriously and deal to with the utmost respect. It's definitely fraught with a whole lot of challenges, as is the case when you've got all these huge personalities and all these passionate personalities, but I love it and I really wouldn't change anything for the world, to be really honest. So, koinei ngā pau o tōku whare. These are the pillars of my house. Te reo me ona tikanga, te reo me ngā tikanga, haka, and my whānau, my hapu, and my iwi. They are what makes me me. Now, if you haven't already clicked on, I'm talking about a metaphorical house here. It's not a real house. It's a metaphorical house of my beliefs and values. And so this house is it's an analogy that refers to, in my view, the entire being of a person. It's your mind, it's your body, it's your spirit, it's your soul. So with this in mind, one of the mantras that I use for myself and with my haka kids and with a lot of other various kaupapa that I'm involved in is this little saying, kia tika te whare, me tika te whare, whakatika I tō whare, which basically all roughly translates to ensuring that your house is in order. So what I mean by that is that in order for your house to be able to stand, your mind, your body, your spirit, and your soul has to find alignment, or you have to find peace within that alignment. And if you are able to do that, then there's nothing that you can't achieve. It's a philosophy that has been instilled into me by my kaumatua, by my tohunga, and by my various pauako that I've had in my 26 years of life so far. And it's the thing that I live by. And so that brings to mind this whakatauki, which I think kind of sums up this and leads me into my next kaupapa. Ta maitea kona ki te whare, te tūranga ki te marae, tauana. And so it's got the translation under there, a child who is nurtured in his house will stand collected on any stage. And so basically what that is about building the foundations close to home. And once you go and you blossom into the world, you can take on absolutely everything if you are instilled in your tikanga and what makes you you. Patua ki tahatū o te rangi, strike at the horizon. Patua ki tahatū o te rangi is actually the first part of a discussion that took place between two very important ancestral figures here on the Tairāwhiti, Konohi o Whangara and Tamahai of the Whānau Apanui area region. Edina can correct me on that one. This kōrero was Konohi's wartime challenge to Tamahai to seize his pa in its entirety. So the full quote is actually Patua ki tahatū o te rangi, tukua te tai kia haere ana, which means either you strike at the horizon or you just let the tides roll. Yeah? And so this kōrero was in part actually a slight on Tamahai's capabilities, but it's also kind of a challenge to him to achieve more than what he initially thought that he could. And so it's in this context that I'm actually presenting this kōrero to you all today. Patua ki tahatū o te rangi has also been Toi Haukura's mantra for this year. And for us, it's really been about recognising the potential of every single opportunity that presents itself to us and bringing that to fruition. I'm going to be honest and say that the reason why I chose this as a title for my presentation today was because I couldn't think of anything else. And actually it was Trees who suggested that we should use it because it's been our slogan. But as I've been preparing this kōrero, it's actually really aligned with the messages that I wanted to present to you today. So, the Ship for World Youth. This is part of the kōrero that I'm going to talk to you today about. And so if I go back to that kōrero, Patua ki tahatū o te rangi, I saw an opportunity that was the Ship for World Youth, and I struck at it when I applied for it. So about last year in September, I saw a link on Facebook. It had popped up on my Facebook timeline, and I clicked on it. It wasn't actually the first time I had come across the Ship for World Youth program. In 2008, I had just returned home from Spain in a cultural exchange, and I hadn't quite gotten rid of the travel bug, so I applied for SWI with the hopes of going. I actually wasn't successful at that time, but I wasn't too bothered. I think it was probably a combination of the fact that I didn't hold the same profiles or believe the same things that I do now than I did then. At that time I was 18 maybe, and so I was very different to the person that is standing here to you in front of you today. So like I said, last year in September I stumbled across the link on Facebook and thought, why not? Let's give it a go. There was probably about a week to go before the submissions closed, and in true Ruth fashion, I dragged my feet and mucked around and actually didn't start my application until the morning of the deadline, which is not something that is advisable to anyone who is sitting in this room. The turning point, though, the thing that really made me take this opportunity very seriously, I have to give that credit to my partner, Rongomai. A few nights earlier, he and I were sitting down at dinner and we were just having a chat, and I actually said to him, I'd seen this link and I'd said, how would you feel about me going away for a wee while? And he goes to me, well, what's a wee while? And I said, like 8 weeks. And he was like, what? And then he was kind of like, let me think about it and then we'll talk again. And I said, okay. And so the night before I was meant to do the deadline, the cutoff date, he sat down and he said to me, I've been thinking about this thing. So you're going away, you're going on a ship with all these people potentially, and you're going to do what? And I said to him, well, as far as I can see it, it's just kind of like wānanga, talk about social issues, those kinds of things. We're trying to save the world. And he was like, okay. And then because he's a high school teacher, he basically lectured me about the importance of young Māori youth seeing other young Māori youth strive for opportunities. And that was his argument. And so he told me, if you go, you don't go just as yourself. You go as my nieces, our kids in Te Manawatahi, his students at Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Ngā Uri a Māui, the students at Horoi Te Wānanga, your students at Toi Haukura. You go representing everybody who comes behind you, and you create an opportunity and you create a perspective that if you can do it, then everyone else can do it. And so that's what sold me. And he actually sat with me the next day to help me with my application, which is not usually what he would do. So thanks for that. And we wrote my application together. And one of the things that was really awesome about that was that from that point onwards, I had a purpose on the ship. I was going for a reason, and I knew what that reason was. And I held fast to that reason from the time I left my home here in Gisborne to the time I returned to my home here in Gisborne. All right, so what is SWI anyway? The Ship for World Youth. The acronym for the Ship for World Youth is SWI. They are acronym crazy, the SWI people. Everything's an acronym. And so if I accidentally go into the acronyms, Trees is going to tell me that so that I can explain what those acronyms mean. So anyway, a little bit of history about SWI. It's operated and organised by the Cabinet Office of the Japanese government. Most everything is funded by the Japanese government, and then they distribute out all of the paperwork and things like that to other governments. Interestingly enough, actually last year was the first year that the Ship for World Youth New Zealand Delegation was not funded or supported by MYD, Ministry of Youth Development. The very first time, I'm not too sure, I think it was about restructuring or something like that. Anyway, so it's run by that program and then disseminated into the different governments, different nations. In 1959, this program was established as the Japanese Goodwill Mission Program. And then in 1967, it changed its name to the Japanese Youth Goodwill Cruise Program. And then finally, in 1988, after restructuring, they finally settled on the program as it stands today, and that is the Ship for World Youth Leaders Program. SWI's purpose, I've taken this straight off their website, is to broaden the global view of Japanese youths to promote mutual understanding and friendships between Japanese and foreign youths. It's also to cultivate the spirit of international cooperation and the competence to practice it. And also to foster the youth with capability of showing leadership in various areas of international society. So one of the really I suppose interesting things about this is that obviously because it's conducted, it's operated by the Japanese government, that there is a real push to grow the Japanese participating youths on board. And that actually really makes for quite an interesting environment, because on the one hand, you've got all of these overseas delegates who have to go through quite a stringent application process. people have to hold community profiles, regional, national profiles, business profiles in other countries. It's quite a robust system in some countries. So on the one hand, you've got these overseas delegations whose members are actually functioning at quite high levels in society. So there's doctors, there's lawyers. There was a person who was the representative of his country on the United Nations Youth Board, which blew my mind because he was so casual and laid back. Pretty awesome guy. But, you really, with the creme de la creme of some of these countries, and it's really quite mind-blowing. So within their respective countries, these people are already holding those top positions, whereas with the Japanese delegation, at least in my experience, that delegation was largely made up of undergraduate students who are kind of on the cusp of entering those kinds of phases in their lives. So you've definitely got different perspectives, you've got different paradigms, you've got different dynamics playing out in front of you. And after a while of that happening, it's quite interesting to see what goes on. And even though you're on this huge ship, that ship's walls starts to creep in and it starts to feel like quite a confined space. And then you realise and take stock, I'm on this boat and I'm in the middle of a random ocean somewhere with literally 300 other strange people that I don't know. And it's quite challenging, and sometimes it's really frustrating. And so you have to learn to overcome these kinds of frustrations, and you have to learn to overcome these kinds of differences. And then you have to come to terms and learn how to manage your reactions to those differences. And so I used to love just saying to everyone, this is like a big social experiment. Just put all these random people with all of their belief systems and stuff and just chuck them on a boat in the middle of the ocean and see what they do. You kind of, if you put it like that, you're kind of hoping that everyone is still alive when you get back. So the ship that I was a part of was the 28th ship for World Youth. These are my batch mates. This is the whole lot of us, the participating youths. On top of that, we've also got an administration team, and then we've also got the workers who are on the ship, the crew workers. So I think all up, there was about 350 plus people that are on the ship at any given time. And then we also had people coming on and off as they go. The overarching theme for the 28th ship for World Youth was to infinity and beyond, tomorrow's leaders today. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, what does that mean? And then I kind of thought about it a little bit more, and I actually realized that for me it was quite a daunting and far-reaching aspiration. And so to make sense of that thing, for me, I just went straight back to those po that I talked to you guys about, that I introduced to you earlier on. Now, one of the first things we had to do as a delegation was actually to put together a national presentation. And we pulled together a 7-part skit which addressed the positive and negative aspects of New Zealand society from a youth perspective. We highlighted the good, the bad, and the ugly, and people were definitely quite taken aback at our honest portrayal of some of the really serious issues in our society today, things such as child poverty, domestic violence, youth suicide, our binge drinking culture, our gang culture, race relations, and the whole clean, green New Zealand image that we ship out to the world. People don't usually like to highlight their shortcomings, but I think that if we're talking about creating tomorrow's leaders today, then we at least have to acknowledge that these kinds of things exist, and we actually have to have an opinion about it. Of course, all of this was all balanced with some of the great things that make our country wonderful. We highlighted things like rugby and the All Blacks, the Lord of the Rings, the invention of pineapple lumps, which are amazing, our typical Kiwi humour and our slang, our accent, and the number one topper of the list of things that people know about New Zealand, sheep. All the sheep that we're famous for, which is crazy. On the ship, I was actually an assistant national leader. The acronym for assistant national leader is ANL, and I was more affectionately referred to by one of my other colleagues, in that typical Kiwi humour, as an anal. He still calls us that, by the way, and I know that he's watching, so thanks, Brands. That meant that I got to write parts of our national presentation content. But what was actually presented was a collected, shared view of the New Zealand delegation. On a personal level, though, that slogan, "To infinity and beyond, tomorrow's leaders today," that for me is really about us going backwards in order to move forward. And this was captured in some of the verbatim that was presented in our national presentation. It went a little bit like this: yesterday's mistakes today, yesterday's mistakes today, today's successes tomorrow, tomorrow's leaders today. So what that is about is that in any situation, we need to acknowledge the mistakes that happened in the past, because those are the things that directly affect us here in the now, in the present. Here in the present, we need to find ways to overcome those mistakes, or right those mistakes, so that we can build successes for tomorrow. And so if we're able to do that, then the tomorrow, all they have to do is look back and acknowledge the journey that got them to their success. And so this, for me, directly relates back to this whole cyclic view of time from a Māori perspective. It was something that is deeply entrenched in my own belief system, and it was quite poetic to me. Participating nations. So these are all the nations that took part in this 28th Ship for World Youth last year. So we've got Australia, Bahrain, Chile, India, Mexico, obviously New Zealand, Russia, Sri Lanka, Tanzania, and the UAE, and also Japan as the host country. Barring Japan, who had about 120 participants, give or take, the rest of the delegations were made up of about 8 to 12 delegates. This is my New Zealand delegation. I won't name them all. Look at them, aren't they a beautiful bunch? We're actually you can see just by this photo, we're quite a diverse makeup. So if I can just look at the demographics for a second here, and I'm really sorry, guys, for making you guys statistics, but this is just how it goes. So we were made up of there were 3 of us of Māori descent, 4 who are New Zealand Pākehā European descent, 2 who identified as Indian but were Kiwi grown, 1 who identified as of Iraqi and Syrian descent, 1 who was of Asian descent, and 1 who was of Pacifica descent. So that's a really, really good mix, a big melting pot there. On top of that, amongst us, we had 4 university students, 3 undergraduate, all studying international relations or politics, political science, and 1 postgraduate who actually completed his master's degree and sent it off when we had 5 minutes of internet in Singapore one time. So, and he actually, by the time we got back to Tokyo, we'd found out that he'd passed with honours. He passed with an A overall, so we were stoked for him. We had 1 public servant. We had 1 guy who he kind of considers himself a jack of all trades, but at the time he was working as a techie in Auckland. There was me, I was a lecturer. We had 2 people who worked in social working type forum. We had 1 medical doctor, 1 psychologist, and 1 lawyer. So quite a mix of people with really different backgrounds and really different paths in life. But largely, we were actually able to get on really, really well and manage our relationships. And I have to say, too, that we still maintain those relationships. I literally get messages from all of these people every single day. They blow up my Facebook all the time. And it's awesome. It's really awesome. So this is just a map of our journey, where we went. So we actually started off in Tokyo. And it was just the overseas delegations that met in Tokyo. We met there for 3 days. to meet and greet each other before we got on the boat. So we were in Tokyo for 3 days. We just did sightseeing, went to kind of all the major places that you need to go, like we were introduced to the cabinet office. I think I can't remember, we went to the UN university, United Nations University. That was pretty cool. We did all of that. And then we were actually spread out, and we were sent off into the different prefectures in Japan. And so a prefecture, if you're not sure whether it's just like a region, but maybe it's more like a state. I'm really bad at geography, sorry. It's just a part. And so the New Zealand delegation, along with the Sri Lankan delegation, we were sent to Mie, which is like central eastern Japan. And it was absolutely beautiful. So we were billeted out into host families, and then we returned, went to a ninja museum, which was really cool, and then we went back to Tokyo to meet up with the rest of the overseas delegates and also our Japanese counterparts in Tokyo. While we were in Tokyo, we stayed at a place called NYC. It was I can't actually remember what the acronym stands for, but it's it was actually the Olympic Village when they had the Olympics in Tokyo. We lovingly referred to it as prison. It was like prison. We weren't allowed to go anywhere. We were locked in, and so we all got cabin fever or prison fever or whatever fever. So any opportunity we got to walk outside those gates, we were off. From NYC, we actually travelled about an hour and a half away to Yokohama, where our ship was. So the Nippon Maru, which was the ship that we boarded, that was waiting for us there, and that's where we departed onto our journey. And so you can see that's where Yokohama's there. And we went down here into Singapore first. So it took us about 8 days to get to Singapore. And while we were going to Singapore, I know everyone thought that I was just going to be on this awesome cruise where you can just chill in the sun and have cocktails. I so wish that was the case, but it wasn't. But what we did do was cool as well. So during those 8 days, the leg in between Japan to Singapore, we actually had the national presentations, which I mentioned earlier. So each delegation had to present some sort of presentation talking about their country and what makes it interesting, basically. And so that's what we did going through to Singapore. We stopped in Singapore for a day and refueled there. And then we're back on the ship. And we made our very first port of call, official port of call, in Chennai, India. While we were on the ship to Chennai, by this time we had been split up into things called course discussion groups. And so these were just specialised groups that talked about specialised topics. And so we had things like information and media, youth entrepreneurship, education, which I was a part of, and disaster and risk reduction, etc., etc. I think there was about 6, and I can't remember what all of them were. But I was a part of the education course. We also, at this time, had ship-wide forums discussing project management, leadership, and the other one was cross-cultural communication. The latter two were particularly amazing in my view, and they were quite valuable, the learnings that were brought out from those two lecturers in particular. When we got to Chennai, at the ports of call, we had to split back into these discussion groups. So my discussion group, which was education, and we visited institutions. And so we visited a college for women when we were in India, and I'm not too sure if you know, but actually it's quite rare for women to be in education in India. And so an institution that is built specifically for the learning of women is a really big deal. And so that's what we did. We just sat with the students and kind of went around in classes with them. We toured around the school, that kind of thing. And then we got back on the ship. We travelled a few more days into Sri Lanka, and we ported at Colombo. And again, during that time, we're in the ship time, we're in course discussion groups, talking about our experiences that we've had at Port of Call. We're also talking about leadership, those leadership forums and all those kinds of things. It's constant wānanga. It's literally, you don't really get a lot of time to stop. So we're up at 8 o'clock in the morning, starting our classes, I suppose we can call them, our seminars, until about 9 o'clock at night, starting the seminars. So that's 12 hours. And true to the Japanese style, everything is down by the minute. Everything is marked off by the minute. It's very typical Japanese style administration. So a lot of the time we're absolutely exhausted, but that's okay. So when we got to Colombo, again, we went to institutions, and one of my absolute highlights of being in Colombo, apart from staying with my wonderful host family who fed me so well, I just couldn't even eat anymore. But also Sri Lankan food is the most amazing cuisine in the world, just by the way. We also visited this institution, a school for the deaf and the blind, and it was a really beautiful experience watching these kids. The Sri Lankan education system is not like ours. Sri Lanka is still a third world country. And so the education system doesn't support special needs in children. And so the institution that we went to is actually privately funded by some trust. I can't remember what it is, sorry. So they just established the school, and they've got all these little kids who are both deaf and blind, and it's just amazing. And while I was there, I watched this troupe of dancers, deaf girls, dancing to music that they couldn't hear, and I just thought that it was amazing. And then I watched this little group of kids, about 12 kids, playing their traditional drums. They can't see a thing. And so, it's one of those really moving experiences where you think that sometimes your problems in your world are really not even on the same scale as somebody else's. And so it really makes you stop and appreciate the things that you have. And it also, for me, it inspired me in terms of watching these kids having to face the adversity that they have to face, and then overcoming it with just the utmost class, actually. I just had so much respect for those children, and it was a really life-changing experience for a lot of the people in my course discussion group. Then from Colombo, we went back to Singapore, and we just basically wrapped up everything. We started to wrap up all of our leadership program stuff, all of our cross-cultural understanding stuff, all of our course discussion stuff and project management stuff. And then we started to actually plan for the future, voluntary activities that we wanted to do when we got home, and ways to keep in touch, and ways to internationally affect each other through our kaupapa to move our iwi, or move our peoples forward. From Singapore back to Japan, back to Yokohama, it was basically everybody was in mourning. It took us 8 days to get back to Singapore, and everybody was in mourning. And I'm pretty sure I was probably one of the only happy people going home, because I got to come home to my partner. But everyone's like crying and trying to come to terms with the fact that they've just had this life-changing experience with these people who were once strangers and who are now some of their closest comrades in life, and they're about to leave them and may not ever see them again in their lives. So, those things are all, that's basically our journey in a nutshell, what we did. I suppose one of the key points I want to share with you at this point is that when you consider the length of the journey and the experiences that we've had, there's plenty of opportunity for people to talk about how they feel and what they're doing and what their life is about, what their purpose is. And that's exactly what people were talking about. I don't know what my purpose is in life, and I don't have a clear path in my life. That was the vast majority talking about this kind of thing. They were trying to find themselves. And so when I stood back and reflected on this, actually for me, I was the complete opposite. I looked at that whole thing, and at the end of the journey, the thing that I got most out of SWI is that it absolutely reaffirmed that everything that I do has value, and that everything that I do everything that I do contributes to my society, my whānau, my hapu, my iwi. And so it goes back to that kōrero that I had with Rongomai right at the start about my purpose. Why was I there? I was there to represent my whānau, my hapu, and my iwi. And when I did step away and look at it, that's exactly how it happened for me. And so I was really chuffed about that. I was like, yes, ticking off the list. But the biggest challenge for me was actually holding on to those beliefs and those values while I was on the ship, making sure that my whare was tika, making sure that my pou were actually standing erect while I was going on the ship, while I was in this journey, because it was actually, when I think about it now, it was quite hard because it seems so unnatural to practice the things that I do in my everyday life here in a context like Swai. And so that was quite unnerving for me because, like I've already said, these things are the fibre of my being and they're exactly who I am. And so that being compromised it's really unnerving. So I go back to the pou of my whare. Ngā pou o tōku whare, the pillars of my house. With that in mind, all of those challenges and that feeling of unnervedness, I decided to find every opportunity to exert these things in my ship life. So with te reo and tikanga, it's a common practice here at Toi Haukura. Every morning we come in and we karakia and we mōtiatia. That's something that we do to focus in our thoughts for the day, and it's something to whakatau our wairua, to settle our spirits and our beings and all that kind of thing. And it was something that I took all the time. I did every morning. I have to say that usually I'd be quite overt about that kind of thing, but on the ship I was quite... I wasn't overt about it. Only because I knew that people would think I was weird if I was sitting there like, moi o no, we talk, muttering to myself. So largely I left all of that for when I was in the shower. Karakia was a huge thing for me as well. Before I left, I had spoken to Uncle Derek, who advised me, who reminded me that the places that I was going, ngā whenua I haere ai au, India and Japan, are ancient civilizations with ancient beliefs. And so there are other ancient things that exist there that are not necessarily for me. And so karakia became a really, really integral part of my daily journey. And a lot of my own delegation mates won't know this, but it was something that I practiced religiously, every morning, every night. It also just helped me to stay connected with who I was. There was plenty of opportunity for karanga and whaikōrero actually. Anytime we went onto any of the new whenua, we were always welcomed. And so that was my opportunity to deliver that welcome. Most of the time people were like, why are you singing? And I was like, it's just what we do, it's our Māoriness, and that's how I have to do this, because if I did it, it's rude not to. I wouldn't be upholding the mana of my tikanga. At every single opportunity I would take the chance to mihi the people who hosted us, mihi the people who took the time out of their day to do dinner or something like that. I was trying to find ways to exert my Māoritanga so I could hold on to it, because it's really important to me. And like I said, this whole Swai context it was almost unnatural to be practicing those things, whereas I can stand here and mihi to people and everyone's like, oh yeah, now sing a song. You know, it's not a normal thing, and so I was finding ways to do that. One of the most beautiful experiences that I can illustrate this whole thing of sharing of culture and of holding on to your culture is an example of when I was staying with my host family in Mie. So on the last night, this photo is of a presentation of tea. The tea ceremony in Japan is quite an ancient tradition. It's a beautiful tradition. It's actually not my photo. I couldn't find my own photo, so I stole this one from my friend RJ. But this is just the presentation of the tea. But on the last night that I spent in Mie with my Japanese host family, I was actually invited to be a part of a traditional tea ceremony. And the house that I stayed in had a room with tatami, and that's where the tea ceremony was being held. Oopsies. I, along with my Japanese host mother, host father, grandfather, and sister, were all served tea by my host grandmother, who was actually a teacher of that whole protocol. We had to kneel on the tatami mat for like 2 hours, and my knees were killing me. They were absolutely killing me. I really wanted to sit down, but I was also, it was almost like being in a pōhiri process for me, that, you know, out of respect and out of the tapu for the mahi, you sit and you just take it. But I literally could not walk for like 15 minutes after that. It was so painful. Even though I could feel every single nerve in my leg by the end of that, I actually felt really, really humbled to have been taking part in such an ancient ceremony. It was amazing. And I was even invited to prepare and serve the tea as well, with the guidance of my host grandmother and my host mother. And that's a memory that I will definitely treasure for a long, long time to come. When we finally finished the last part, which was like eating these little confectionaries, I decided that I needed to reciprocate that hospitality by way of mihi to my whānau. And so I spoke to them in Māori, I mihi to them in Māori, and then I kinaki that with a waiata, presented my koha, gave it to them, and then translated everything. By the time I had finished all of that, the whole lot of us we were just in tears. It was such a moving experience, that whole cross of cultures, that even though you don't speak the same language, that you can still understand each other. It's just a really strange feeling, but the whole lot of us were just in tears. And I think it was mostly because that we were really reluctant to part each other the following morning. But that sharing of cultures was, in my opinion, the catalyst to what I can only describe as one of the most poignant moments of my entire life, and that is these letters. These letters were written by my host father, my Japanese host father. He could not speak a word of English. He had never even heard of Māori until I bowled up into his house. He actually had no interest in the world outside of Japan. He was very entrenched in his own tikanga, which I admire, by the way, because I'm the very same. He was very entrenched in his tikanga, he was very entrenched in his tuakiritanga, his identity, and he didn't really see the value of looking at people outside of Japan. I admire that in him. I'm a staunch that person too. So it was really, really amazing to me when I received these. And I know that he wrote this in the wee small hours of the morning, because when we finished the tea ceremony, it was past midnight. And then he and I sat up for 2 hours he pointed at things and said them in Japanese, and I repeated, because that was as far as our conversation could extend. So I know that he stayed up all night to write these letters. And he presented them to me before I left my Japanese home. And so I don't know if you guys can see that, but I'll read the English one to you. He actually wrote it in English, and Māori. I'll read the English one to you. Dear to Ruth, it was a short time. It was to meet you really good. Last night it was a lot of fun. I cannot forget last night of your speech and song, and meeting with you will not forget. It reminded me of you every time I see the necklace. Let's reunion absolute again. Happiness, thank you, please in Hayashi family. And so it's also very interesting to me that he signed it from the family, because I know that the family didn't know that he had given me these letters. And that's also what was very, very touching to me. What absolutely tipped me over the scale and I was just bawling was when I read the Māori version. It's actually, I think it's like kind of like a mix of Pacific languages. Like, can you see it? Yeah, so it says, Here kia Ruth, ko te he wā poto, ko reira ki te whakatau I a koe tino pai, last pō, ko reira te rota o te ngākau, e kore e taia e ahau e wareware ki te pō whakamutunga o tau kōrero me te waiata, e kore hui ki a koe e wareware. whakamanatu, which I think is like Tongan or something, I'm not too sure. Te reira o koutou katoa, wā ki te ahau I te tahai. Kia reuniona o pūmau anō, mā uru koutou tēnā I roto I te oa Hayashi utua whare, which is also not Māori. But even though, I looked at this and I just thought that the sentiment was just one of the most beautiful things ever. And it really is when you don't have to have words, it's just all gestures and sentiments, and you can make a real connection with people and really change and affect people by doing this. But I truly believe that this would never have happened to me, never ever have happened to me, had I not have held fast to my own tikanga and shared my own culture, who I am, my identity and my Māoritanga. I definitely don't think that this would have happened to me had I not have done that. So, my final pou, the thing that I tried to do while I was at SWI was do the haka. Actually, this was the easiest one because while I was on the ship, I actually headed a kapa haka club. So this is us, this one here is us just presenting at our club sign-up exhibition night. So about 2 minutes before this, we were like, well, what should we do? And they're like, let's just do the haka. We're like, okay. So we got up and we did the haka with my 3 comrades there. It was one of the most popular clubs on the ship. We had the second highest membership. It was only rivaled by the Chilean haka, or as they like to call it, the salsa. But I actually like to believe that we were the most popular club, and that even though the salsa club had more people, a couple more people than we did, it's more about the quality of those participants than the quantity. That's what I like to tell myself anyway. So along with my delegation mates, Te Oronga and Hoani, we actually pulled together a small bracket of items consisting of an action song, tūtira mai ngā iwi, a whakawhiti, neke neke, and the pièce de résistance, a mighty haka kamate. I actually have a link here. I'll see if I can click on it so you guys can see it. Sorry, I'll have to go this way. Here we go. Oh, those are my friends. Look, that's my delegation trying to talk to me.
We're looking at Manawa.
Oh, can't you? Oh, stink. Okay. Sorry. This is them anyway. I don't know how to make it play. I'll just stop that there, since we can't see anything. So that was them singing Tūtira mai ngā iwi. They also found heaps of opportunities to actually perform the haka. The haka was something that everybody was so fascinated by. They just loved it. And so this is this dude at the front here wearing the glasses. He was actually the leader of our kapa haka club, so he led all the hakas. He was really good at it, and he's from Bahrain. He actually also organised his own delegation, so I think most of his delegation was in the Kapa Haka Club, and then they went back and taught the remaining members who were not in the Kapa Haka Club, and they pulled together a little performance for their government office and actually performed it. And so I just think that it's so wonderful. I think it's amazing. This photo is captured just before we're about to leave Japan, coming home to New Zealand, and so they performed this haka in honour of the New Zealand delegation, which we thought was very sweet. And this is our national leader and one of our other delegates, and one at the back there. They're all returning the sentiment. And then this one is obviously the emotion that's felt. So, you know, as I've already mentioned, haka is one of my greatest loves. It's powerful, it's invigorating, it's evocative, and for me it's a physical outlet of my creativity. That's where basically my creativity lies. And so when you see images like this, you know, a person who is accustomed to seeing haka done, being moved to tears because he's watching these other people who have no affiliation to haka or to Māoridom treasure this taonga it's absolutely mind-blowing. And that's exactly the way that I feel too. In sharing this taonga with my peers in Swai, I couldn't help but feel really proud of my culture and humbled by the passion that others who are not Māori, the passion that they displayed for this amazing gift that we have, that is haka. They also treated it with such care and respect that it made myself step back and reflect and take stock of how lucky I am to live and breathe and eat and feel haka every single day of my life. So I was really grateful to be able to help them move that way. My final po is this whānau hapu iwi. This is my whānau. My SWI 28 delegation, the New Zealand delegation, this is my whānau. This is us in our natural habitat. This is what we normally like. We look all official in the photos, but we're actually all really crazy. Like I said, for all intents and purposes, this was my family. These were the shoulders that I leaned on. They were the ears that I confided in. They were the backbones that held me upright while I was on the ship. They were also my connection to home. They were my connection to my land. They were the constant reminder that I'm there for my people, for my own whānau. I was also, these are a couple other photos of my delegation. That's us just being clowns. I was also lucky enough to forge new whānau bonds with my Japanese family. It was about creating connections at a home away from my home in Japan. And so I'm a proud older sister to little Mimi here, and whāngai daughter to Kyosuke, who was the one that wrote the letters, and Mika, who was my host mother, and proud whāngai granddaughter of my Gigi and my Baba, my Japanese Gigi and Baba. So they were amazing. I've also made new friends and family in Sri Lanka. So in here we've got Sudhira, Sonal, Shanidu, Gangani, Sumida and Minaka, who are the people that hosted us, and along with my SWI companion Ayumi, who's sitting in the middle there in the pink shirt. We were absolutely spoilt rotten by this family and I just don't even have the words to be able to express my gratitude to them. Those people, the Hayashi family, my Sri Lankan family, my New Zealand delegation, they were my whānau. My leader group, which was a kind of like a conglomerate of people from different delegations, kind of chucked together, they were my hapu. They're kind of like who I chilled with when I got hoha of my whānau. And so this is us playing sports in a gym. And my iwi are my SWI 28 batchmates. All of these people are absolutely important to me because they help to reaffirm the things that already exist in my life, in my daily life. Their involvement in my daily life for that time, they actually mimicked the same systems that are already in place here in my life here in Aotearoa. It's as if two worlds first collided and then they kind of converged. And so it was a really, really magical moment for me. In their own way, all of these people have helped shape me to be the person that I am today. They're the strong foundations on which my whare stands, and they help me and encourage me to grow in everything that I do from today onwards. They're the reason that I do what I do too. So I just want to reiterate this whole kōrero, my whare kōrero, taku whare. The pou of my whare, te reo me ngā tikanga, that is my identity. It's my values, it's my beliefs, it's my philosophies, it's the things that make me who I am today. My second pou, haka. Haka is the way that it's creativity for me. It's the way that I choose to channel my artistic creativity, because without art in this world, we would be colourless. It's just how it is. And then my third pou, they are my backbone, my whānau, my hapu, my iwi. They're the reason and the motivation that makes me strive for the things that I aspire to. And so I am so lucky to be able to have two whole different worlds that these things collide in. My Māori world here at home in Aotearoa, and my ship whānau, my ship world that I created while I was away on the Ship for World Youth. And so I go back to that whakatauki. Te mai te akona ki te whare, te tūranga ki te marae, tauana. A child who is nurtured in the confines of home, in the house, will stand collected, and it says there on the marae, but on any stage. So if I take into what this means in terms of this concept of leadership, I think that in order to become a leader, you must first know yourself. Me tika tō whare, you have to know yourself. You also have to make sure that the pillars in your whare, are all standing erected and standing where they need to be. You have to allow yourself the ability to stay true to your identity. You have to allow yourself a space to grow your creativity, and you have to make sure that your backbone is strong. If you are able to align all of these things, mena kei te tika tō whare, mena tika ana tō whare, there's a place for you anywhere in the world. You can literally recreate your own systems and transplant them into any situation that you need to face. Which brings me back to the title of my kōrero. Patua ki Tahatū o te rangi. Patua ki Tahatū o te rangi, tuka te tai kia haere ana. That was the challenge that Konohi presented to Tamahai. Patua ki Tahatū o te rangi. Take it all or take nothing at all. And that's my message to everybody today. In these kinds of situations, if we're looking at leadership, you either need to put everything in or nothing at all, because it's just one of those situations. You can't be a leader if you're not willing to sacrifice absolutely everything. And so I suppose that's basically the moral of the story today. I know that lots of people, my SWI batch, they'll be like, I thought this was about SWI, but it is about SWI. It is about SWI, but really it's more about who we are as a people, our identity, our culture, and how we can strike at the horizon and make sure that we grasp every single opportunity that we take. Nō reira i runga i era kōrero katoa, tēnei ka mihi atu ki a koutou e whakarongo ana ki enei pahupahu aku, pahupahu roa, pahupahu maha, engari tēnei te ngākau maha ki e mihi atu ana ki a koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, hui hui mai tātou katoa. Kia ora.